You know, it's really crazy to think that Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is now over 5 years old. It's been following this trend recently where a lot of early Switch games are just starting to make me feel really old. Breath of the Wild just had its 7th anniversary, Kirby Star Allies just had its 6th, Mario Odyssey is a little under 6.5 years old now, and Splatoon 2 and ARMS will also be turning 7 come this summer. It's really crazy how time flies. It only feels like yesterday that I was playing Mario Odyssey or Kirby Star Allies just for the first time. But with pretty much all of these games, after their initial release, the hype and anticipation for them pretty much fizzled out. Now, yes, pretty much all of these games had some sort of extra DLC after the fact, like Balloon World, Champion's Ballad, or in Splatoon 2's case, 2 full years of support. But out of all of these early titles, no game has kept us fans consistently engaged and excited like Smash Ultimate. See, with a series like Smash, I've always found that it's more about the journey rather than the destination, and Ultimate is no different. This game's journey lasted for over 3.5 years, and since we recently had the 6th anniversary for when that journey first began, let's take a look back at everything this game has had to offer from beginning to end. But before we actually get into that fateful March Direct that started it all, we first need to set the stage to understand how we actually got here. So let's face it, when it comes to most things, Nintendo is a completely ass-backwards company, especially when it comes to anything remotely modern. Seriously, mention anything about Switch Online or really anything about the Wii U in general, and most people will know exactly what you're talking about. But for as ass-backwards as they can be, there is one thing that has always stuck out as being one of the most modern and forward-thinking moves the company has ever made. One that has even had their much larger competitors trying to replicate all these years later, and I am of course talking about the Nintendo Direct. In October of 2011, Nintendo would present their first ever Nintendo Direct to the world. What this essentially was a pre-recorded presentation outlining all sorts of things the company was currently working on, to include new game reveals, in-depth looks at upcoming releases, and information about upcoming projects that was all geared towards the fans. And these are key to understanding what makes the more recent Smash games so different, and I would argue more memorable compared to the first three. Now, yes, I'm sure Melee and Brawl had a few showcase trailers. Hell, I know Brawl made a huge deal about Sonic and Snake's reveals, but the general strategy Nintendo had for these games pre-direct was to show off the game with a trailer that had a good amount of newcomers, and then boom, see you in 7 to 9 months. Sure, maybe a trailer showcasing someone special here or there, but generally speaking, here's the game, see you then. But of course, this would all change with Smash for Wii U and 3DS, the first game, or well, games in the series to be revealed and released in the Nintendo Direct era. The new strategy this time around was to announce the game, but instead of showcasing a bunch of newcomers all at once in one big trailer, we would get individual trailers for characters released periodically throughout upcoming Nintendo Directs. This was an amazing new direction to take the series' marketing in, making each new fighter feel that much more important and special, and most of all was able to keep up consistent levels of hype for over an entire year before its release. Now, am I saying that these single-handedly saved the Smash series? No, not really. The series didn't really need saving since the series' sales had only been growing with each game, with the exception of Smash 4 for obvious reasons. But what this did do was make the lead up to release that much more impactful and memorable, which had never been done before. And it's this distinction that I think differentiates the old Smash games from the new ones. The first 3 games, yeah, they were cool crossover fighting games, but that's all they really were treated as, whereas the last 2, or 3 depending on who you ask, would be treated as monumentous events with journeys that could last for potential years at a time. A fact that I think a lot of us tend to forget is that the Switch really was Nintendo's last-ditch effort to stay afloat in the console market. I know it's hard to think about now with how successful the console has been, but back then, it really was their last-ditch effort. We often forget how much of a devastating blow the Wii U really was to the company at large, and with this essentially being Nintendo's last shot, they absolutely gave it their all in 2017. Both Mario and Zelda, hands down Nintendo's biggest franchises ever, would both receive one of the biggest and most revolutionary titles either series had ever seen, all within the same year. For either one of these franchises, a completely new game is something that dominates every gamer's calendar and is typically such a huge ordeal that they pretty much take up the entire year's worth of conversation. But this year, Nintendo decided to release them both within 6 months of each other. On top of that, Splatoon, Nintendo's most recent and extremely popular IP, would release a sequel. Mario Kart 8, the most acclaimed game in the series, would be ported onto the console with some worthwhile additions, and Nintendo would bring out the big guns at this year's E3. If you were there, you know that most of these were pretty much empty promises, but it was clear that they were truly pouring everything they had into this console, and by the time 2017 came to a close, it was clear that Nintendo's efforts were an absolute success. But as 2018 began, a huge problem was starting to arise. See, 2017 was extremely packed with content. In fact, some could even argue that it may have been too much. I mean, to get a new 3D Mario and Zelda within the same year was awesome, but then the question of what's next started to become more and more prominent. Like I said, just one of these games being released within a given year was more than serviceable, but by February, things were only looking worse for Switch games in 2018. At this point, the major games we seemed to be getting for the year were Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, a Wii U port that dropped in mid-February, Kirby Star Allies in March, and Mario Tennis Aces as the big summer release. Yeah, fucking Mario Tennis. But all of that would change with one little Nintendo Direct taking place on March 8th, 2018. There was a good amount of hype surrounding this Direct. It essentially was laying out the foundation of the rest of Nintendo's plans for 2018, hell, maybe even a look at 2019 as well. And surprisingly enough, the Direct was really solid, giving us a lot of information about things coming to the Switch in 2018. Although, strangely enough, looking back, this Direct was more about the major third-party support coming to the console rather than first-party. I'm sure nobody was complaining, though, about getting the Crash Insane trilogy, Undertale, Travis Strikes Back, South Park The Fractured But Whole, Dark Souls with its own amiibo, but looking back, Nintendo's own output for this thing was really mediocre for the Switch, but for the 3DS it was a much different story. Although not taking up a huge portion of the Direct, for it being one of the last times the 3DS had a major presence in one of these things, it received its much deserved attention in this Direct. The Switch on the other hand, like what, more ARMS content, really? Seriously, in terms of giving us bigger first party games to look forward to this year, this Direct absolutely failed. Like, wow, this summer's gonna be packed. Mario Tennis Aces and Captain Toad Treasure Tracker? But as has almost become standard in modern Directs, Nintendo had just one more trick up their sleeve. And after revealing that we would be getting more single player content for Splatoon 2, they signaled that they had just one more little announcement before calling it a day. And that's weird. This is just the Splatoon 1 trailer. I mean, why would we be getting a remake of the first game since the second one just holy fucking shit. This was a bombshell announcement. If you were on the internet at the time at all, the Eye of the Inkling Kid was inescapable, becoming a huge meme almost instantly, along with the reactions. Whether you were a huge Nintendo fan or not, you heard or saw something about this reveal. It was that big. Despite all the new forming questions this teaser spawned, one thing was clear. This was Nintendo's plan for 2018. Hell, maybe even beyond, depending on how concrete that 2018 release window really was. But Nintendo would remain radio silent about this game all the way until E3 2018. And when I say radio silent, I mean radio silent. Nintendo provided absolutely no information about this game during the 3 months between its reveal and E3. And for a game still supposedly slated for a 2018 release, it wasn't necessarily concerning, but the clock was definitely ticking. There really was no information provided during this time. In fact, we weren't even sure if this was going to be an entirely new game or just a souped up version of Smash 4. And considering this was very early on in the Switch's life, it was very possible that this just could have been an enhanced version of Smash 4 as it could have been a new game, but we would all have to wait until E3 to get our concrete answer. Now, regardless of whether or not this was a new game or a port, Smash was still on top of everybody's priority list going into E3. To really emphasize how big of a deal this game was, Nintendo's direct presentation for that year's E3 was 42 minutes and 44 seconds long, and the Smash Bros. Portion took up over 25 minutes of that time. That means a little under 17 minutes was dedicated to everything else. And out of like the 10 or 15 games shown off here, the only ones I found to be somewhat important were Super Mario Party and Fortnite. I know, fucking Fortnite. But at the time, this was kind of a huge deal. But once those 17 minutes were up and Sakurai appeared on screen, that was when the real presentation started. The only real questions people really wanted answers to at this point were whether or not this was a new game, and if it in fact was a new game, who was going to make the final cut. Obviously, I just talked about the debate on whether or not this was a port or a new game, and they made it pretty clear very quickly that, oh yeah, this was a new fucking game. But the questions on who would be making the final roster was a little more heated and intense than in previous games. Excluding the original on N64, every Smash game has had a few characters that wouldn't make it over to the next game. Typically, these were characters that not too many people cared about, like Pichu or Young Link, but with the amount of new and highly requested characters introduced in Smash 4, a lot of different fan bases were on suicide watch. And after a brief introduction, Sakurai would spend the rest of the time talking about the thing we all wanted to know about, the characters. Before showing us a video highlighting the returning characters, Sakurai pointed out that each character would have a number next to their name that represented the order in which they were introduced into Smash. I always found this to be really cool, giving us an official roster order, whereas before we just kinda had to guess. Also, for me personally, it gave me a way to arrange all the Smash amiibo I had in a more concrete order. But looking back, it really is interesting how this kind of foreshadowed this trailer's biggest reveal just just minutes before it happened. Starting out the video, we got a lot of guaranteed returns. Characters like Mario, Kirby, Samus, Donkey Kong, and Pikachu are all characters that we expected to come back. We finally got our first look at Breath of the Wild Link, replacing the Twilight Princess version of the character, and a brand new rendition of Zelda, which was completely unexpected. And of course, the first big reveal of the video, the return of the Ice Climbers. Although they were pretty much a guaranteed return, it was still nice to finally see them back after being briefly absent in 4. Following that, we got our first in-game look at the Inklings, the huge return that was Pokemon Trainer, bringing back Squirtle and Ivysaur after also being absent from Smash 4, and a few more bigger returns from 4 like Wii Fit Trainer, Ryu, Cloud, and then the reveal of Solid Snake's return was so fucking cool. I always felt like that after Brawl, he was just kind of forgotten about. I mean, more people were upset about the Ice Climbers not returning than they ever were Snake. And what a hell of a character to choose to announce that everyone was coming back. And with characters like Pichu, Young Link, and Wolf being present in the video, it really hammered home the fact that everyone really was back. It was clear that the characters were the main focus for this presentation. After the opening, Sakurai went through a bunch of characters, listing off changes both big and small. Some characters like Link, Zelda, and Fox got complete redesigns. A bunch of other characters like Mario, Pikachu, and Ike had some more minor changes highlighted to include some new and returning costumes. Some of the more notable returning fighters this time around like Wolf, Pichu, Young Link, Pokemon Trader, and Snake also received brief overviews. And pretty much everybody would have their final smashes retooled to some degree to make them more quick and to the point. Sakurai would also tackle one of the biggest complaints from Smash 4 head on. Despite the amount of new fighters introduced in Smash 4, a lot of people were quick to point out the overabundance of clone characters. The major 3 that come to mind are Lucina, Dark Pit, and Dr. Mario. People were mainly mad at these characters because they felt as though that they took away spots from more wanted and more complex characters. Because of these complaints, Sakurai and the Smash team would end up incorporating something called Echo Fighters into Smash Ultimate, basically officialized clone characters. What's interesting is that Sakurai also mentioned during this is that these characters in past titles didn't take up nearly as much development time, thereby kind of refuting some of the theories pertaining to certain characters. Now, this didn't squash every complaint. I mean, Lucina and Dark Pit, yeah, these obviously had to be Echo Fighters, but to still consider Dr. Mario and Falco their own fighters was a little weird for some people. But with the new fighter label to hopefully calm down most fan complaints, we then got the reveal of a brand new Echo Fighter in the form of Daisy, obviously being an Echo Fighter for Peach. I always found this to be a really strange choice, especially considering that there's so little material to take from Daisy. I mean, I think it's cool that she's here, but also doesn't really do much for anyone either. But then we were shown our first new character of the game, and what the fuck? So I'm pretty sure most people had a similar reaction because at this point Inkling was like completely old news. She was in the initial reveal trailer and the Everyone is Here video, so it's not like this was a surprise. This was pretty much a breakdown video of the character, which is fine. It's just that for most people, we were under the impression by the choice of words here that this was a completely new reveal. And after a brief overview of assist trophies and god damn it, an overview on some new and returning stages to include the news that every stage would have a Battlefield and Omega variant, and the announcement that this game would have GameCube support, no shocker there, we would finally get our first, or well, I guess our second official character reveal for Smash Ultimate. Now, right before this, Sakurai made it pretty clear that due to the whole everyone being back thing, there wasn't going to be as many newcomers as I'm sure fans were hoping for, which is completely understandable. Holy fuck, is that Ridley? They said it would never happen. They said he was too fucking big. I guess not, motherfuckers. So Ridley has had an interesting history with Smash, arguably one of the main baddies of Metroid behind the big fucking brain, and is hands down one of the longest and most requested characters for Smash. Ever since appearing in the opening scene for Melee and the fact that pretty much everyone else has their villain in the game, it seemed fair to include him, but for years we were told that he was just too damn big. So for them to officially include him as a fighter was a huge win for the community, and also considering the fact that Metroid Prime 4 was still somewhat tangible at the time, made it look like a hell of a teaser for it. And to end it all off, we got the confirmation that this game would officially be releasing on December 7th, 2018. Nintendo's E3 presentation was a pretty good introduction to Smash Ultimate, but with the game being less than 6 months away, this was not nearly enough information. Sure, we knew everybody was coming back, but aside from brief mentions of assist trophies and stages, that was all we really knew about this game. So when it was announced that we would be getting a dedicated Smash Ultimate Direct in early August, there was a lot of excitement behind it. But before I go into the actual Direct, I need to acknowledge one important thing. In the process of making this video, I have had to rewatch, hell, relive a lot of these really cool moments. However, when it comes to this direct specifically, it appears that Nintendo privated it a long time ago and nobody can explain as to why. Thankfully, there's been a re-upload of it so it's not lost to time and is where I ended up taking the footage from. So a quick thanks to DonnerMilb24 for keeping this direct alive. Anyways, back to the actual direct. As was to be expected, this direct opened up with a new character reveal, or should I say characters, because we ended up getting both Simon and Richter Belmont revealed as the two new fighters as a part of Smash Ultimate, with Richter being labeled as Simon's Echo Fighter. This was a really cool reveal. Castlevania is one of those classic NES games that everyone's heard of, so for arguably the two most well-known characters in the franchise to make it in as fighters felt right. I always appreciated this inclusion more because of the history that it holds rather than the game itself. Castlevania is just one of those iconic names that most people recognize whether they've played it or not. Also, the whole Luigi's Mansion tie-in was really cool to see. A big chunk of this Direct's opening was solely dedicated to everything Castlevania, from the characters, the stage, the music, and assist trophies, although much of it dealt more with Simon rather than Richter, which is understandable considering he was the guy for so long, but when it came to Richter's overview, it created a pretty good transition into the reveals for Chrom and Dark Samus. Yeah, there really isn't too much to say about these two. They were both very highly requested characters, yes, even Chrom, that were extremely similar to other fighters already in the game, and for that I can appreciate them being brought in as Echo Fighters. From there we got a much more in-depth look at the stage selection this time around. Like the character selection, the stage selection here is comprised of mostly returning fan favorites. There are a few new stages here, like the last Direct showing off the Breath of the Wild stage, and this Direct showing off the New Donk City stage from Mario Odyssey. We were also shown the massive upscaling many classic Melee stages would be getting in this game, and God, these look downright beautiful, especially the Fountain of Dreams, while any and all N64 stages would continue to stay in the 90s. In addition, every stage present in this game not only has its own unique Battlefield and Omega variants, but are also fitted to support 8-player matches, which was severely limited on Wii U. And if you thought the character selection was going to be big, you clearly haven't seen the total stage count in this game. 103 unique stages is nothing to scoff at, and considering the fact that each has its own Battlefield and Omega version, that number easily jumps past 300. It may not be every stage ever made, but it was damn near close, and seriously, the amount of customization that comes with these stages is amazing as well, with one of the coolest additions being the stage morph. This feature essentially lets you play on two different stages with them morphing into each other after a certain amount of time. I've always felt like this option has always been overlooked, but it really is a cool concept for a stage option, and I'm very happy that it's here, even if I don't use it that often. We got a brief section on the vast amounts of musical tracks available in the game that ends up totaling over 900 different tracks, as well as the ability to make your own playlist and use the Switch like an iPod, a feature that doesn't really matter all that much, but again, another welcome and really useful addition. We also got much more extended looks at the vast amounts of modes, items, Pokemon, and assist trophies present within the game, making it a much more well-rounded overview than the previous presentation. But that wasn't all, as we still had one more major character reveal before this Direct came to a close. So you're probably wondering what the actual fuck was with the loud pounding in the background at the end of the Direct, and to be honest with you, to this day, I don't fucking know, but that would quickly transition into the reveal, notably lacking the new sleek intro, and I believe it's the only reveal for the base game to do that. Anyways, we get a short reel of a ton of hero and villain matchups that are possible within the game. And then we cut to the fucking monkey. So at this point, it was kind of obvious who this was, but to finally see K. Rool after not having seen him for over a decade and in glorious HD was an amazing moment to experience. They had this little fake out with DDD, but when he just kind of fucking killed him, that was a really special moment. And oh my god, they made Gangplank Galleon actually sound good. Being a huge Donkey Kong fan, this was special, and more than anything else made me really want a new Donkey Kong Country game so badly. And I'm still waiting for that, but regardless, this was a perfect reveal. Now, coming out of the Direct, there were two major things that people were talking about. The first was this blurred out mode on the main menu, which was pretty quickly deciphered to spell out the word spirits, and was pretty much universally agreed that this was probably some sort of huge single player campaign. And the second, bear with me, had to do with the chairs. So this was the Direct where all the weird theories and speculations started to amp up, with this being the first and probably the most desperate. See those chairs behind Sakurai? Well, if you thought those were just for decoration, shame on you, because there were a ton of people who firmly believed, and I mean firmly believed, that this was a subliminal way of announcing Skull Kid as one of Ultimate's newcomers. Suffice to say, these people are fucking insane. Although everyone's minds were still honed in on Smash Ultimate, having a normal Nintendo Direct presentation was nice to finally have again. Let's be honest, from March onwards, most of the Nintendo talk was absolutely dominated by Smash. Their E3 presentation this year was pretty much just Smash with a few extra games that preceded it, and the Direct in August gave us more than enough Smash content to hold us over for a little while. So to hear about some other big games was a nice change of pace, and to get Luigi's Mansion 3 as the opening game in this Direct was really cool. Obviously because this series isn't really acknowledged all that much, but also because this was directly teased by Nintendo in Simon and Richter's reveal trailer back in August, and for that made this reveal that much cooler. This Direct had some cool reveals. The 3DS was still getting support for some reason, New Super Mario Bros. U was getting a Switch port, we got a more in-depth look at Super Mario Party, that new Yoshi game that was only ever shown off at E3 2017 finally got an update and is now coming out in 2019, and looking so much better by the way, and probably most infamously the announcement of Nintendo Switch Online. See, for the past year and a half, online functionality for the Switch was completely free, meaning you could play online with your friends free of charge. Granted, it wasn't the best online connection in the world, but because it was free, most people really didn't care too much. But when Nintendo announced they'd start charging for it come this September, and the quality didn't change at all, that's when people started to become pissed. Personally, I never really cared too much about this decision. $20 a year to play games online and have an assortment of NES games and later SNES games available wasn't that bad of a deal at all. And I know people bitch all the time about the internet quality, but honestly, I've never really had too much of an issue with it at all. But it would be a huge understatement to say that the timing here was not that ideal, as many were quick to realize that Smash Ultimate would be the first major multiplayer game for Nintendo that you would need to pay to play online. I mean, it was made clear that this change was bound to happen at some point, but to be able to play online with people for free for Mario Kart 8 and Splatoon 2, but not Smash, did not sit well with a lot of people. But you know what didn't sit well with me? This fucking bullshit. So at the very end of the Direct, we got Isabelle from Animal Crossing revealed as a new fighter, and I was pissed. It's not that I hate Animal Crossing, far from it actually, but considering it was made very clear that there weren't going to be too many new fighters, this almost felt like a wasted spot. And I mean, how different could she be from Villager? Apparently not that much. Looking back, this reveal wasn't really that bad at all. Sure, it's kind of annoying since Isabelle did end up being a pseudo-clone of Villager, but considering it was used as a way to announce a new mainline Animal Crossing game, more than made up for it. Generally speaking, Smash Ultimate didn't suffer from a ton of major leaks, especially those that were super widespread, but it wouldn't be accurate to say that this game had no leaks at all, let alone those that were actually correct. It's just that none of the leaks that happened ended up getting any sort of wide-scale attention, except for one. In late October of 2018, a few images were posted to Snapchat and then 4chan that supposedly leaked the last few characters of Ultimate. This thing was extremely convincing. See, Nintendo's big thing with this game was the "Everybody's Here" tagline. Sakurai pretty much said that due to how much of a big undertaking this was, it was extremely unlikely that something like this would ever happen again. And because of this, the major marketing gimmick for Ultimate was the huge mural of all the fighters, with every new fighter getting added to the picture upon their reveal. Now, logically speaking, this banner had to have been completed well before it was first shown off back at E3. Of course, it needed to be able to accommodate all the characters planned, but also so that companies tasked with producing the marketing materials for the game were able to do so adequately and within a reasonable amount of time. So for a marketing company to get an early copy of the full and completed mural made a ton of sense. But see, here's the other thing. Companies that produce marketing materials for high-class clients like Nintendo likely also have other big-name clients. You know, maybe like Universal Pictures. I think you see where I'm going with this. So the reason the most infamous and well-known leak from Smash Ultimate is referred to as the Grinch Leak is because alongside the banner pictures, there was also marketing materials for the upcoming Grinch movie by Illumination present in the photos as well. Now, dealing with Snapchat, these pictures obviously weren't in 4K, but damn, they were convincing. The completed leak banner revealed that the last fighters to be revealed for Smash Ultimate were Banjo and Kazooie, Mach Rider, Geno from Mario RPG, the Chorus Kids from Rhythm Heaven, Ken from Street Fighter, Isaac from Golden Sun, and Shadow the Hedgehog. Now, although there were some pretty big detractors adamant that this leak was 100% fake, most people tended to believe that this leak was more true than not. This leak truly was the perfect storm. Sure, there were very compelling arguments as to why it might not be totally legit, but not enough to truly debunk it and label it as completely false. All we as the fans could really do was wait for Nintendo to confirm or deny the leak's validity at the final Smash Bros. Ultimate related Direct slated for November 1st. This was a time to be alive. The theories and speculation surrounding this game had hit an all-time high, and today was the day where everything, every theory, every supposed leak, every bullshit piece of speculation would be either confirmed or denied. And as the direct began, we went straight into the reveals for the last few fighters. This ended up being a really good trailer. Now, Ken was the first fighter revealed here, which left all of us still scratching our heads. See, both the Grinch Leak and the other contradictory theories all had Ken as one of the newcomers, so even though he was revealed, all of these theories were still fair game, but any and all theories would be squashed by the introduction of the final character for Ultimate, Incineroar. This was pretty crazy because no one had predicted his inclusion at all. In fact, none of these major leaks and theories had even predicted a new Pokemon rep as a part of the game, which in hindsight should have been really fucking obvious. And now having every single fighter revealed, we got our first official look at the character select screen, which this time is based around when each character joined the series. I always like this little section, especially with the starting roster being the original 8 from Smash 64. But even though all the characters were revealed, we still had one mysterious mode that hadn't been revealed yet. So everyone in August ended up being extremely accurate, as the blurred out mode in fact was called Spirits. That was about it though. Yeah, so everything else besides the name was wrong. No huge single player mode, just a glorified badge mode. This ended up being one of the biggest letdowns of the entire direct, and the fact that these would be the replacement for trophies just added more fuel to the fire. Maybe a little bit of it's on us for being too ambitious, but damn, this was really disappointing. The rest of the direct was pretty much dedicated to whatever else hadn't really been shown yet. New amiibo were shown off very early on, some more smaller features were shown off, a few more assist trophies, fuck you guys, and of course some new Mii Fighter costumes. Not too much, but all important stuff nonetheless. And then we got some uplifting news. Now, typically when a game announces DLC prior to launch, things don't go over so well, and rightfully so, but in the case of Smash Ultimate, it was more than acceptable. With the amount of content clearly present in the base game, DLC was more than okay, especially because it looked to keep the game's hype going, but in terms of the actual contents of the past, there was none to be seen here. Well, that's not entirely true, because they showed off that if you bought the full pass, you would get this nifty-difty Rex Mii costume from Xenoblade 2. It was clear that this decision was made very recently, and considering they mentioned that the game wasn't finished at this point in time, meant we probably weren't going to hear anything about this thing until way into 2019. Despite that though, we ended up getting one more fighter reveal right after this announcement. The reveal for Piranha Plant is probably one of the funniest things I have ever experienced. I mean, come on. What the fuck? This was one of those wacky characters that almost seems like it was made on a dare, and I am so glad that it's here. Truthfully, I've definitely thought about the potential for basic enemies to join the roster, although if I had to place money on it, I probably would have said a Goomba over a Piranha Plant, but regardless, Piranha Plant was so cool and funny because it was clear that this one was made for shits and giggles and just a ton of fun to make. However, the way they ended up releasing him was kinda strange. So he was first labeled as a pre-order bonus if you bought the game before release, which I believe was extended to buying the game before the end of the year. They made it sound like he was only a pre-order exclusive, but locking an exclusive fighter behind a pre-order just never made sense. In reality, Piranha Plant was treated as a singular character pack that would need to be bought separate of the game and the DLC pass. Simple enough, but I always found the way they announced him and just the way they released him to be really strange. I get why he wasn't made part of the DLC pass, but to kind of have him off in his own eShop void was still strange nonetheless. But before they ended the direct, Sakurai began talking about some sort of fateful day, to which I'm sure everybody was completely confused. Even more, the fact that he said the game would have an adventure mode after all, like it was already well known. This was especially surprising considering the huge letdown of the whole Spirits things towards the beginning of the direct. Apparently there was an in-universe explanation for all of these characters being Spirits, and oh my god. This was the single player mode we were all waiting for, and holy fucking shit. You really had to be there in the moment to understand the impact of this entire thing. Like the Inkling hit in March, if you were on the internet at the time, you knew about this trailer. If you saw it live, you remember where you were. Avengers Infinity War was one of the biggest movies of the year, which also made this that much cooler. This essentially was the ending of that movie, but on steroids. Instead of half of everyone dying, fucking everybody but Kirby perished before our eyes, leaving us on a hell of a cliffhanger before the game's release. The 2018 Game Awards took place on December 6th, the day before Smash Ultimate's release. Now remember how Sakurai said Ultimate would be getting DLC? Well, we were never actually given any sort of timeline to expect news about it, just sometime in 2019. So to see the first new fighter this early, held the day before release, was completely unexpected, especially considering the fact that Joker himself wouldn't be released in the game until mid-April. I don't really have too much to say about this reveal. I didn't watch it until after the fact. I also legitimately thought this reveal happened in January of 2019, up until I started writing during this part of the video, and at the time I really couldn't tell you what Persona was, but I can safely say since its reveal, I'm a little more familiar with the franchise. Which is why, if the reveal happened today, I would be fucking pissed. To me, it seems like the memes about how weird Persona fans are definitely increased tenfold after Joker's inclusion in Smash, but at the time, I really didn't care too much about this reveal. The main thing I remembered about it is that everyone beat the "oh, the Joker's in Smash" bit way into the fucking ground. For as much time as I've spent talking about this game's lead up and eventually the DLC, I think it's only right that I talk a little bit about the actual game itself. I would end up getting Smash Ultimate on Christmas Day of 2018, as I'm sure would be the case for a ton of people. This was a time in my life where I could definitely afford it, but it just made more sense to hold out until Christmas, and oh boy, it was worth the wait. This game pretty much was my Christmas break, and spending Christmas night trying to recruit as many new fighters with my cousins and friends really made it a memorable Christmas. A thing that I really haven't mentioned is how much I really like the frequency in which you have these encounters with other fighters. For a game having 70 or so fighters, you are bound to have a lot of these, and starting with the original 8 really does put into perspective how expansive this game's roster really is. And considering my main Nintendo multiplayer game of choice before this was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, it was really nice to actually earn a bunch of shit for a change. Speaking of Mario Kart, it used to be the go-to game to play with friends in high school, whether it was at school or at my house. But with the release of this game, that quickly changed to Ultimate and is still the main go-to game whenever we feel like playing something. Granted, Mario Kart had a little bit of a revival with us during the Booster Course Pass, but still all these years later, our main go-to game is still Smash Ultimate. It actually became more of a social thing for us too, more than Mario Kart had ever been. When I used to have get-togethers at my house back in high school, this would be the thing to start it all off before we would go and play Manhunt or go swimming or just whatever we were planning on doing that night. But on top of just the social aspect of it, there is a ton of shit to do in this game. For instance, the single player campaign World of Light, which I have still yet to beat over 5 years later with like 15 hours or so poured into it. I know, I'll probably get to finishing it at some point, but let's be honest, that's probably not going to be anytime soon. Back in the day though, I would play this game a ton on my own because there was just so much shit packed into it. It really is an amazing game that I have poured so many hours into, but I'm sure you've heard this song and dance over and over and over again over the past 5 years. The game is great and packed with a fuck ton of content, obviously, but something that really isn't expressed all that much is the memories made by it that will last with people for the rest of their lives. Whether it was with the build-up in 2018, actually playing the game by oneself or with others, or even going through the roller coaster that was the DLC. So before I go on any further about the DLC, let me explain my thought process about buying this thing. Now, at no point was not getting the full fighter pass on the table because honestly, it just wouldn't make that much sense. I understand why Nintendo did it this way, but as a real fan, I'd rather have the most complete version of the game as possible. But I also didn't get this, or spoiler alert, the second one right away either. My philosophy throughout this entire thing that I was going to purchase the fighter's pass when a character I personally like was added, and in the event that the DLC would become a huge fucking letdown, I would just buy the full thing when it wrapped up. But thankfully, each pass had at least one character that I liked, and the first of these characters would be revealed at E3 2019. It wasn't Hero. I mean, Hero's reveal was fine, it wasn't overtly offensive to me, but god, it just didn't interest me at all. Don't get me wrong, I think it's great that Dragon Quest was getting this kind of representation, especially considering its impact on the history of gaming, and for that, it most certainly deserves a spot here. But did we really need another anime sword fighter? Also, maybe I'm just fucking stupid, but did anyone else for a split second think that when these guys appeared on screen that they could have been the rest of the fighter pass? Nope, that was just me? Alright, cool. But thankfully, that wasn't it for Smash at E3 2019, because at the very end of the Direct, we got probably one of the coolest reveals we have ever gotten. The reveal for Banjo and Kazooie is probably one of the biggest labors of love I have ever seen with one of these reveals. If you don't know, these two have such a rich and complicated history with the Big N, and so much of it is referenced here in this trailer. Having them appear in a remake of the King K. Rool trailer, the Raring to Go tagline, the DK crew cheering them on, it was all so fucking perfect. This was an amazing moment that none of us ever thought we would ever see, so to have it here before our eyes was a dream come true. And holy shit, they topped that. To finally see the Baron Bird back at all, let alone back at their proper home with Nintendo, was such an amazing moment to experience. This was the reveal I was waiting for, and is what would solidify my choice to purchase the DLC. By the time this year's September Direct came around, we were eating pretty good in terms of DLC. Joker came out in April, Hero came out in July, and we knew that Banjo's release was coming very, very soon. So it was kind of hit or miss if we were going to get anything Smash related here at all. But pretty early on in the Direct, Nintendo gave us a look at pretty much what was coming for the rest of the year for Smash. This was obviously aimed at giving us a final concrete release date for Banjo to drop, which I'm pretty sure had already leaked at that point, but this Direct confirmed that Banjo would be released, well, right now. But that wasn't the only thing Smash had to offer in this Direct. In addition, we got the 4th DLC fighter revealed to be Terry from Fatal Fury. Now, there's a reason I refrain from saying reveal trailer, and that's because, well, this one was just really weird. I would even go as far to say it was more of a concept trailer than anything else. All it did was say, hey, Terry's the next fighter, see you later. No gameplay, no nothing, just his name and presumably his in-game model. I'll be honest with you, I don't know who the fuck Terry was, or is for that matter. Neo Geo and SNK are both companies I'm vaguely familiar with. Hell, I'm even aware of Fatal Fury a little bit, but Terry himself, I've never heard of him. This reveal didn't upset me. In fact, I barely remember it even happening in the first place. I don't know. It just didn't do anything for me. If anything, I was just happy to see Neo Geo and SNK getting some recognition in Smash. You know, this whole DLC thing went by a lot faster than I thought it would go. I wasn't really sure what to expect from You'll See Something in 2019, but it definitely wasn't 4 out of the 5 DLC fighters to be revealed and released. In a way, it was cool to get all of this content so fast, but conversely, it was also kind of sad to see the journey end so soon. I mean, for me, that was the biggest thing about the DLC. It was meant to extend the journey a little bit more, which it did, but also super fast. Not all of these characters were home runs. In fact, Banjo was the only one I really gave a shit about, but all of them were characters I could respect being chosen. And as the final fighter to wrap things up for the DLC, Nintendo would ultimately decide to choose
Byleth.
Are you fucking serious?
Yes.
Okay, so let me get this straight. The entire time, we have gotten 0 Nintendo fan-requested characters, just a bunch of third-party ones. And now we're finally getting a Nintendo character, probably the last fighter in the entire DLC, in the entire Smash Bros. Universe, and it's a fucking Fire Emblem character? Are you kidding me?
Well, Fire Emblem is a very popular game, and is highly requested among our fans.
Okay, so Dixie Kong, Bandana Waluigi, fucking Waluigi? No, we're doing fucking who from Fire Emblem?
Byleth is from our newest Fire Emblem game. Very popular. Very critically acclaimed.
Whoa, wait. We're making a second DLC pass.
Why didn't you start with that?
I'm sorry, you cannot convince me that this was not done intentionally. Look, I understand the whole, the Japanese fans wanted it and Nintendo's a Japanese company, but Jesus Christ, Byleth, really? Again, just to reiterate, out of all the characters that have been a part of the DLC thus far, they were all third party, and to my understanding were all more business moves if we really want to simplify it. So it just baffles me that out of all the potential first party choices we got, they chose another fucking Fire Emblem character? Look, I understand that Fire Emblem is super popular in Japan, but not 8 fighters popular, especially considering the fact that they're all just sword fighters. I've heard people try to compare this to the Mario series having 11 different characters, but what I feel people tend to forget is that the Mario series itself is a host to a plethora of other series. So yeah, technically there are 11 Mario reps in the game, but under that umbrella, 5 other franchises are covered. And if I really want to be a dick about it, there are so many Mario spin-off games that could be included in that count as well. And these people also really fail to consider how much more universally popular Mario and his cast are on a global scale, so it's really not that equivalent. I don't know, I remember hearing this argument back in the day, and I remember it just never made that much sense. It would be more than safe to say that a lot of people were pissed about this, but what ended up softening the blow for a lot of people was the announcement of a new Fighters Pass, including not 5, but 6 characters this time around. This was much more of an uplifting announcement, basically continuing the journey for another extended period of time, which was probably my biggest complaint about Byleth. Like, you're gonna end on this? Well, apparently not. Hopefully they don't fuck this one up. Like the last Fighters Pass, we weren't really given any concrete information as to when we would be seeing any news about this thing, and as the world shut down quickly after these 2 released, there was a good chance we weren't going to hear too much about the new DLC for quite some time. But surprisingly, despite everything going on in the world, the Smash team was still producing at the same output as they were pre-COVID, with us getting the complete first half of the second DLC in 2020. And all of that would start on June 22nd with the introduction of Min Min from ARMS. Now, at this point, many of us had ruled out ARMS from having a fighter in this this game at all because Springman, who many assumed would have been the rep, was revealed to be an assist trophy very early on. But hey, never say never. I've always liked this inclusion, although personally I would have preferred this abomination to be the arms rep. The fact that we got an arms fighter at all is something I've always found to be pretty cool. I always thought it was kinda sad how quickly this game died off, especially considering how Nintendo was hyping this up to be the Switch's Splatoon, but now that we have an arms rep in Smash, I feel as though the series has gotten its much needed justice. See, this is what we were expecting when getting Nintendo characters as a part of the DLC, not another fucking Fire Emblem character, rather a character in a series that more deserved it, and this was a pretty solid start to the second DLC pass. Not enough to make me fully pull the trigger on it. That would actually happen on October 1st, 2020, a day that for a small few will forever live in infamy. So at this point in 2020, people were starting to kinda get over this COVID thing. I mean, after a summer that for the most part felt like a return to normal, everything else started to fall back into place. Now, for me, this meant the inevitable return to school, and for just being able to interact with people I really hadn't been able to, and the fact that it was my senior year, I was kinda happy to go back. But my district was weird. See, instead of returning to operations as normal, because why would we do that, they elected a new kind of schedule. Instead of being up at the ass crack of dawn, they decided that for this year, and this year only, school would start around 10:30 and still end around 2:30, and instead of taking 6 classes a day, they turned it down to 4. Obviously, there weren't too many complaints about this. Mix that with the fact that I was finally able to drive to school, and this new schedule pretty much felt like college before college, and it was during this time that that infamous day occurred. As I was rolling out of bed around 9:30, I was greeted to a livestream presenting the newest addition to the Smash Bros. Roster. Now, when I say I was rolling out of bed, this was literally one of the first things I saw. Let's just say I wasn't fully with it yet. It took me quite a few seconds to actually figure out what the fuck was going on, but once I noticed these spider eyes in the background, it hit me.
What the fuck?
There was no fucking way that Steve from Minecraft was officially in Smash, and then when he mined his way in, revealing himself to the world, the reality settled in that, oh yeah, this was real. This was one of those weird moments for me. For the meme, this was fucking awesome. The Steve for Smash thing had been a running joke for a while, so to actually see it be materialized into something was really amazing, but also really, really funny. But as a kid who grew up playing Minecraft, this was a very magical and endearing moment to experience. Although I grew up as a Nintendo kid, I also was very much a Minecraft kid as well. Like so many others, I adored this game, and sure, Smash had so many characters I loved and grew up with, but not as many that grew up with me. There was a time in my life where I played video games where Minecraft just didn't exist. I can't say the same for Mario, Donkey Kong, or Kirby, so to see a game that I not only loved but also watched grow alongside me was something really special to experience. And then they fucking circumcised him. On the same day that Disney revealed a bunch of Disney Plus projects for the first time, which apparently was the same night as the 2020 Game Awards, didn't know that before writing this, Nintendo would reveal the third fighter of the second Fighters Pass. Now, before knowing that this was the 2020 Game Awards, seriously, I had no idea. I always found this timing just to be a little weird. Like, I was getting a bunch of Marvel and Star Wars notifications and then one single Smash notification. Now, I'll admit, for a second right about here, my immediate first thought was,
Holy shit, Marks!
Okay. Hear me out. As a fan of Kirby, I mean, come on, that's just kind of what he does. But it was made very clear that this in fact was Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII, an inclusion I am more than okay with. This was an amazing trailer, and a very brutal one at that. Like, how the fuck is this a still image from an official Nintendo trailer? I have never been a Final Fantasy guy, but I can admit that this was a damn good inclusion, and one that I really, really respect. Final Fantasy VII is such an iconic game, and even though Sephiroth could easily be considered just another anime sword fighter, his iconicity more than justifies his inclusion here. Probably the most interesting thing about Sephiroth's inclusion is that Nintendo held an event within the game that gave players who had purchased the DLC the ability to unlock him a week early. The event was called Sephiroth's Challenge, and all it really consisted of was a match between you and Sephiroth, with you being able to unlock him early upon his defeat. Not very complicated, but still a cool little footnote with his addition to the game. Looking back, it basically was just a regular encounter with a new fighter in the base game, but considering the DLC just kinda gave you the new fighter upon release, it was nice to actually do something to earn it. It wasn't much, but the fact that it was something is what made it cool. The Direct for February 2021 was probably one of the most hyped Directs Nintendo had ever put out. It was the first official Direct the company had put out since September of 2019. Now, granted, Nintendo had put out a few of these partner showcases and one for Mario's 35th anniversary during 2020, but those aren't really the real deal, especially the partner showcases. But to finally be getting a fully fledged Direct after almost a year and a half was a really big deal. And of course, fan speculation was rampant. I mean, it had been over a full year since the last Direct, so of course the fans had a ton of expectations for this one. Breath of the Wild 2, Mario Kart 9, Mario Odyssey 2, a 3D Donkey Kong game, Metroid Prime 4, Ocarina and Majora's Mask remastered, and of course a brand new Smash reveal. Who might it be? Maybe Crash? Spyro? Rayman perhaps? Nope, instead of any of those logical choices, Nintendo decided to give us
Pyra and Mithra. Surely you've heard of that.
Are we really doing this shit again?
Yes.
Please tell me this is the only low point in the Direct.
I wouldn't call this a low point of the Direct. We have an amazing lineup of games coming right after this announcement. We have JRPGs, anime games, more JRPGs, anything a good Nintendo fan could want out of a Nintendo Direct, we have today.
Seriously, fuck this Direct. I think it's safe to say that everyone was really looking forward to E3 2021, especially us Nintendo fans. With the show being briefly absent in 2020 and having gone through the clusterfuck that was the 2021 February Direct, everyone was hoping that Nintendo's E3 presence would be significantly better. And it most certainly was. WarioWare, Mario Party, Monkey Ball, Advance War, Tony fucking Hawk, and of course getting our first ever gameplay footage of Breath of the Wild 2 and the bombshell that was Metroid Dread. This E3 will always be special to me. Not just because it was the last E3 we ever got, but also because it just so happened to coincide with my high school senior week, with the Nintendo presentation occurring on our beach day. It was really cool to watch this with a bunch of friends, some of whom I hadn't seen for a good amount of time. As you could tell, I've always loved E3 as an event, but for almost my entire time following it, it's been more of an independent experience, which, don't get me wrong, is cool, but I always wanted to at some point have a giant watch party for the event, so to actually kind of have that was really special. Like I said, there was a bunch of us watching this together, and in a weird way, it kind of felt like a proper reunion of friends who all liked Nintendo. We were all squished up into this playground watching the Direct off of my phone, and like the February Direct, this one opened up with a Smash reveal. Now, granted, we didn't know who the fuck Kazuya was, but his trailer was a lot better than this shit, and when the Tekken name was shown, there was a collective O in the playground. Looking back, it's very interesting to see how the last two Directs performances would ultimately be gauged by the Smash character they would reveal. February gave us a shitty reveal, and what followed was a really shitty Direct, and the E3 Direct opened with a strong reveal for what ultimately was an extremely strong E3 presence. But as all these new characters were revealed and subsequently released, we were getting closer and closer to this thing finally being over. Although, if you asked me at the time, I believe there was a chance a third Fighter's Pass could still be announced. It was all dependent upon the upcoming September 2021 Direct. And during that Direct, Nintendo announced the final Mr. Sakurai Presents would be happening on October 5th, 2021. And it was made very clear that this thing really was almost over. And on October 5th, 2021, Sora from Kingdom Hearts was revealed to be the final fighter of not just the second wave of DLC, but the entirety of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. This was not a character I personally wanted. I'm sure many of us remember the Crash for Smash movement at the time, but it was a character choice that I really respected. Sora has always been a highly requested character, so to see it finally become true, I'm sure was special for a ton of people. Although there were two minor controversies that came from this, as is typical with most Smash reveals. So firstly, there were some chunks of people that were genuinely pissed about this reveal, and weirdly enough, some of those people originally wanted Sora back in the Smash 4 days. Kinda weird how that works, isn't it? And secondly, the lack of any reference to Donald or Goofy, the other two main characters of the Kingdom Hearts games, although this obviously fell more on Disney rather than Sakurai Nintendo, as it should have, and it got memed pretty hard. But these were two minor detractions from what really was one of the most beautiful bookends to a game's journey I have ever experienced. This reveal trailer was kind of emotional for me, and I wasn't even rooting for Sora's inclusion in the first place. This trailer felt both somber and magical at the same time. The music, the animation, and of course bringing it all the way back to that iconic eyeball shot that started it all was something very special. This was a celebration of all that had come before, a celebration of the past 3.5 years we had all experienced together, now finally coming to a close. This is a video that's been in the back of my mind since Sora's reveal all the way back in 2021, and through the 2.5 years I've been thinking about and planning this thing, it's given me a lot of time to reflect and just think about my past. When this game was first announced, I was a freshman in high school, and by the time it finally ended, I was well into my first semester of college. This game was there with me through some of my most formative years and created so many cherishable memories, as I'm sure it has for many of you. I am extremely lucky to have experienced all of this when I did. As I'm sure many of you know, I love gaming history and really started to get into it around the time Smash 4 had released, and by the time Ultimate had come around, I already knew about the rich histories of so many of these characters held the series itself. To finally see Ridley be allowed in, to see K. Rool and Banjo for the first time in over a decade, to see a gaming icon of my generation make his way in, and all the twists and turns along the way are all moments that will stick with me for the rest of my life. And for that, I will be forever grateful.